Hi everyone, today we have story of savage crime happened to lovely new wife. Subscribe for more rare and detailed crime stories, so let us go. We have an obsessed killer. In Costa Mesa, California, on the 2nd of July, 1988, just 2 days after moving to a new home, Melinda Gans returned from work to find his wife lying on the floor of the bedroom, a few weeks into her pregnancy with their first child. Melinda was stabbed to death. Costa Mesa, California, a city on the southern coast near Los Angeles, is known for being suitable for family settlement. Here, Kent and Melinda Gans plan to start their own family. The center of any murder investigation is the victim, and knowing her well is the best way to start, said her mother. Melinda was the first of 4 children. Her eyes were wide, and she smiled early. She was very attractive from the day she was born, cheerful, happy, and beautiful. My husband Phil was very kind to her, loved her deeply, and was attached to her, said her mother. Melinda grew up in a Mormon community. If there was an outcast or someone no one wanted to talk to or play with, she would accompany them. She was a kind child. One of the outcasts Melinda accompanied was Aaron Haley. Said Haley, "Our first meeting was at the church. My family had just moved from a small town. I was 16, and that beautiful blonde girl with blue eyes wrapped her arms around me. We became friends from that time." Melinda first met her husband through her work at a local bank. She worked in credit management, and Kent worked at a tire company and sometimes dealt with those who needed credit. Kent would call Melinda at the bank daily for several months. He never met Melinda. He only spoke with her on the phone, but he loved her voice. She was very comforting and kind, and sometimes he would have her talk to customers to tell him why their requests were rejected. He was impressed by her ability to calm them, so he asked to meet her, and when he went to pick her up, they agreed, and she was beautiful. I think he liked her immediately. Kent and Melinda played together. He was gentle and calm with her, and they immediately clicked. Yes, Melinda and Kent married shortly thereafter. A year and a half later, Kent found a job in California, making Melinda the first member of her family to leave Utah. Said her friend, "I was happy for her because she was very happy," which surprised me a little because she was very close to her family, but she strongly supported Kent. By July 1988, Melinda had a bright future ahead of her, but all this would end in a painful ending. Her mother said, "The phone rang, and we were told she had died, that she was killed in her home. I thought, what should I do now? Then I heard a voice in my heart saying, 'Be at peace, be at peace.' I am a woman of faith, but I don't know how you endured it. We had never heard of such a thing in Harrisville, but what was I supposed to do? I have a family, children, and a husband who needs someone he can trust. Of course, when I was a deputy prosecutor, I went to all the crime scenes. It's the best way to know what." Investigator Jack Archer was working on a case and accompanied me to the crime scene where Kent told the police he found his wife. The complex had gates now, but when Kent and Melinda lived there, they were not present, and without a gate, entry was easily accessible. Another detail about the scene suggests that her killer may not have been a stranger from the street. There was no forced entry, no broken window, nothing like that. The investigators thought that someone Melinda knew might have roamed the crime scene with me. When you enter from the door, you would find many boxes because they were moving, and there was a baby mattress because she was pregnant in her 2nd month at that time. What about Melinda? Where is she? As soon as you enter the bedroom, she was lying in front of the door. Melinda was tied up with belts and neckties. In the bedroom, she was raped and stabbed and bled to death. What else did you see at the crime scene? There was a stab wound here, around her heart. It actually penetrated the jacket and, of course, entered the body, then into the lung. Was anything valuable missing from the house? There was a ring and a watch. After taking Melinda's ring and watch from her body, the investigators hoped it would appear in a pawn shop to help them track the killer. This was not the only evidence to follow. Seminal fluid was found in the house, on her body, and on the carpet beside her body. You would think this would be your strongest evidence because DNA can be analyzed, but in 1988, it wasn't strong. The analysis didn't exist at that time, and there were other pieces of evidence left by the killer. In the kitchen, the dishwasher door was open, and perhaps he got the knife from there. Beside the dishwasher, they found clear footprints on the floor, in addition to a single fingerprint on the refrigerator. There were other potential pieces of evidence outside. The same footprint found in the kitchen outside this apartment There was one footprint of a tennis shoe. After the criminal investigation finished examining the crime scene, the investigators were thinking about the motive, and the lack of signs of forced entry suggests that Melinda knew her killer and that the theft was staged to mislead the investigators. As the investigators began searching for answers, the community in her hometown was suffering and could not believe the murder. Did people think Kent had something to do with it? They were worried about such a thing. Almost half of the murdered women are killed by their partners. Was there evil lurking in their marriage? All that District Attorney Murphy knew was that they had to work quickly. The sexual offender who targeted her did this during the day, which means he is arrogant, reckless, and will likely do it again. People like him are terrifying because they are like ghosts. I mean, they will kill someone else unless we stop them. In July 1988, the investigators searched for the monster who raped and killed the pregnant girl, Melinda Gans. They began to suspect the man who reported the crime, her husband Kent. Why did the investigators think Kent was responsible? It's clear that Kent was the one who found his wife and reported the matter immediately afterward. He was very disturbed, and when asked for his alibi, he insisted he was at his new job all day. The investigators quickly verified his story and excluded him from suspicion. After several decades, Kent clearly remembers feeling like he was in the circle of accusation. Were you a suspect? I was a suspect. They brought me into a room and asked me difficult questions, which I answered, and I was detained there for 2 or 3 hours. Do you think? They think you orchestrated it. Maybe you didn't commit the crime, but you arranged it. Is that the case? I didn't care whether I was accused of orchestrating it, being involved, or knowing the killer. They asked and did their job, but this somewhat comforted the grieving husband. He was devastated, saying, "I'm sorry, very sorry. I'm the one who brought her here. I'm very sorry." He was about to tell us that they were expecting their first grandchild. Her dream was to become a mother, and she had planned a trip that would last a week with her. And when was it supposed to start? On Tuesday. We were going to arrive on Sunday. When we returned from church, the phone rang, and it was Melinda. She asked, "What will you eat?" I told her, "I have rice, and that's all I found." I can't believe it. They moved into their new home on Saturday. I told her, "Don't unpack everything on Tuesday. We'll help you when we can. We help each other." She was surprised, saying, "I didn't know what to do." The family will place its hope not only in the great efforts of the police department to bring Melinda's killer to trial, but also in the District Attorney of Orange County, Matt Murphy. So, out of all the cases you've handled, why were you affected by this case? You have this beautiful, innocent, pregnant girl who was brutally killed in broad daylight, and next to her body was a baby mattress because she was going to become a mother for the first time. Then you meet Kent, who is actually a nice man, and you think about what he went through. The idea that someone did this and got away with it makes you angry. As a deputy prosecutor, I want to catch the criminal. I want to achieve justice for the family. Today, Kent Gans still lives in the area. He's married and has his own family, but he talks about Melinda as if she left yesterday. I want to know more about Melinda. We asked her husband about Melinda, so tell me. You married young, right? I used to go to school. I worked at a tire store. I was the man who greeted you when you wanted to fix your tires. That was in Utah. Melinda was the phone girl I talked to every day. She worked at the bank that dealt with my customers to help them with credit. When I talked to her, I was impressed by her simplicity and calmness. You hear this over the phone. Once, a man had a problem with his card and came in angry, yelling at us. I called her, and he entered very angry, then left apologizing profusely. I said, "I'll always call her. It's enchanting." "Yes, how did you count your meeting?" 6 months, I said casually. "I'd like to meet you." She said, "That's fine. I want to see to whom this voice belongs." I said, "Why don't we go out just to get to know each other?" And in the wedding ceremony, we didn't say, "Till death do us part," but "Together to the end, forever." Wonderful, because we believed we would be together forever. Until that moment, everything was like a happy story. Yes, I met a wonderful girl who wanted the same thing I wanted. I fell in love with her. We were excited to have children and created baby items, and then everything suddenly collapsed. Kent still remembers that evening from 30 years ago. Something was strange. I felt something bad was happening. When I opened the door, this feeling intensified. The TV was on, but there was no picture. I felt a terrifying sensation. Then I called for Melinda, and of course, she didn't answer. When I walked towards our bedroom, I saw her lying on the floor. She was pale, stiff, and I remember rushing towards her to find her tied up and thrown on the floor. I was terrified and called. After the emergency call, I was disoriented, providing the information they requested, but I was in shock. How did this happen? Now, Investigator Archer and the crime-fighting team are combing the area, hoping to find a clue that leads them to the killer. A manager living alone in the residential complex left her apartment at 9 in the morning, passing by Melinda's bedroom window, which had open curtains. By 2:30 in the afternoon, when she left for lunch, the curtains were closed. This allowed us to determine the timing of the crime. The investigators guessed that the killer closed the curtains of the ground floor apartment to hide the body because Melinda and Kent had just moved in and had limited knowledge of their neighbors. The investigators searched for someone living in the complex with a criminal record but found no one. They asked me if I knew this person or that person. Kent swore they had no enemies or any disputes with their neighbors. As news of the crime spread throughout the city, fear loomed over Costa Mesa, and Kent's company offered $25,000 for information about the killer. It's unbelievable if this person is still at large. They could do this again. One of the biggest fears I face as an investigator. Days after the crime, there was potential progress in the case. We received a call from the Santa Ana police, who were working on a case where the criminals stopped the victim's car, assaulted, and raped her. This attack happened 2 days before Melinda's murder. Is there a connection between them? We thought we had a suspect. The investigators in the rape and murder case of Melinda Gans were racing against time before the killer attacked again. At the beginning of the investigation, they questioned the neighbors and came up with nothing. We have keys and some physical evidence, but it's not conclusive. There are no witnesses, nothing clear, no solid evidence in this case. So, they reached out to other agencies to find recent sexual assaults. The investigators learned about the nearby assault 2 days before the crime, and in that case, the victim survived. A month after the incident, we received a phone call from the Santa Ana police, who were working on a case where the criminals stopped the victim's car and assaulted and raped her in the car. She told the investigators that after leaving a bar, she stopped a car with yellow headlights because she was drunk and afraid of getting a ticket, of course. So she was cooperative and rolled down the window to find a man in a police uniform approaching. It turned out he was wearing a security guard's uniform with a patrol car, but she believed he was an officer. What happened next was that she received a punch in the face, was pulled to the back seat, and brutally raped and robbed. The woman survived but couldn't provide a clear description of her attacker. Were there similar incidents in the area? 6 days after Melinda's murder, another rape occurred not far away. A woman enjoying a quiet night alone heard knocking on the door. She opened the door to be attacked. She was knocked down and tied up in similar, but not distinctive ways as Melinda was. She was raped, and in addition to the brutal violence, her car keys and a 35mm camera were stolen. The car was found days later parked in the same area where Melinda was raped and killed. Why did he leave the witness? Why didn't he kill her? Why did he kill one and leave the other? I think he killed Melinda for entertainment. He wanted to know what it would be like if he killed her and enjoyed it. Weeks passed without any progress in the case, and a month after the murder, a camera appeared. The police received a call after the raped woman found the camera with the name registered to an 18-year-old named Jason Balcom. Balcom had been released from juvenile court 4 days before Melinda's murder. Had you heard of Jason Balcom before? He wasn't in the circle of suspects, so it was the first time his name came up. He had a criminal record. Balcom lived with his mother and aunt, a quarter-mile from Melinda and Kent's apartment. Did they show Balcom's picture to any of the victims? They did this in Santa Ana, where they took over the case, and it ended in a withdrawal. The investigators confirmed Balcom's identity from the woman assaulted in the Santa Ana apartment. When they went to arrest him, they found no trace of him. 3 rapes, a murder scene, and the prime suspect was at large. What was the atmosphere in the community at that time? They were terrified. He was extremely violent, and remember, he's someone who will continue what he's doing until he's stopped. It's urgent when a day turns into a week, which turns into a month, and this man is still free, moving among people. They were leaving the area, leaving a horrific impact on the region. A woman was in her apartment in broad daylight on a sunny day in Southern California. If it happened to her, it could happen to others. True, the investigators sent Balcom's fingerprints to all police centers and were successful. They got the name Jason Balcom and put him on the wanted list. They managed to track him down in Michigan, and as expected, he committed another brutal rape. A woman was driving to her job. He kidnapped and brutally raped her. She jumped from a speeding car to escape him. Yes, he was caught and sentenced to 50 years for raping her. When you see all this happening in front of you, what do you think? We think we have a suspect here and must follow him. In the end, Balcom was convicted of raping the Santa Ana apartment, thanks to a fingerprint on the victim's camera. Now they needed to link him to the fingerprint found on the refrigerator at Melinda's crime scene. So they compared his print to that fingerprint, and it didn't match. Jason Balcom had committed the rape and theft and pawned what he stole, the camera and Melinda's wedding ring, which never appeared. Of course, DNA analysis was not available. You returned to square one. He's not the one wanted. That's what happened. Yes, the Costa Mesa police did not come close to finding Melinda's killer, and the community was still trembling, waiting for him to do it again. These men are indeed savage, and one of them could cause significant harm, and that's what we're dealing with here. A savage psychopath did it in broad daylight, in the middle of the day. This requires special characteristics to target in the middle of the day, in the morning, with people around him, and I think it's arrogance, extreme arrogance for a serial killer. 3 months after Melinda's murder, new evidence appeared from a nearby city. A man recently convicted of sexual assault in Washington moved to Orange County and was under investigation for a murder. He worked at an auto parts store at the end of the street in the Mediterranean village. The Costa Mesa police were watching him. He was a suspect in a series of sexual crimes, a series of 6 other assault crimes in a different state. He was indeed surrounded by suspicions. He moved to Orange County and got a job. So far, it seems that this man, a suspect, could be Melinda Gans' killer. Perhaps you have a serial rapist and killer. We are facing a possibility that may link everything together. So what we do is contact the district attorney's office to get a search warrant. The investigators got the permission and started searching the man's house, looking for anything that links him to Melinda's murder, and what they found raised their suspicions. They found a toolbox with 3 knives, a promising find because they hadn't found the murder weapon. At the crime scene, they found a tennis shoe, which was also a good lead. The evidence was sent to the lab for examination. It turned out that the knives were not the murder weapon. Further investigation revealed that the tennis shoe did not match. It was not the one worn by the killer. Melinda was killed in the middle of a workday, and this person was at his job, surrounded by witnesses, with a strong alibi. This was certainly a big disappointment. The emergency was still ongoing. The killer was still at large and would strike again. A year passed, and the investigators were no closer to solving the mystery of Melinda's murder. For her loved ones, time had stopped, knowing that the killer was still free. When Melinda was lost, there was a feeling of being adrift, wondering how to find someone else who aligned with one's beliefs and goals. As time passed, the longer the investigations went on, the harder it became to solve the case because people's memories fade and they become less cooperative. There was a thought that perhaps the case would never be solved, but with the development of DNA analysis, hope increased. They continued to work for years, placing the killer's DNA in the national database. At that time, only 38 states participated. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of convicted sex offenders, thieves, killers, and others. The DNA was there, unmatched. There were still 12 states, knowing there was a serial, savage killer at large without a DNA match. There was a thought that someone might escape punishment. With a free, obsessed killer, the family would lose faith in justice, and he would do this again to someone else. In 2002, 14 years after Melinda's murder, a match was found in the FBI's database. They lifted a fingerprint from the refrigerator, which was next to the dishwasher. That fingerprint was always assumed to belong to the killer. In '88, there was no match for that fingerprint in California's database, and no progress was made. But with advancements in technology and state cooperation regarding fingerprints, evidence promising in 2002 led to the conviction of the criminal. The investigators traced the fingerprint, which belonged to a convicted criminal in Kentucky. When it seemed the case was about to be solved, something unexpected happened. The man worked as a quality controller at a refrigerator factory, so the fingerprint was his, and he had never been to California. It turned out he was not the one. Every failure deepened the pain of Melinda's family. For years, they did not know who did this to their daughter or sister. Not only because the case was unsolved, but her younger sister was terrified for years, sleeping under her bed, expecting this man to come to her room door. This is a kind of psychological breakdown for the people around them. People don't understand this about crimes. Of course, the worst thing happened to the victim, but this kills the way of life of everyone affected by what this person did. After the continued failure to solve the case, people asked me to come and speak. For years, I traveled and spoke about forgiveness. Have you truly forgiven the person who did this to Melinda? Forgiveness takes time, especially for a mother. If you can forgive, you can overcome the matter and continue with your life. That's a big faith, bigger than I think I possess. But after 16 years since Melinda's murder, a miracle occurred when Kent called, saying, "Are you still here?" They found someone. The unsolved case of Melinda Gans's murder caused emotional turmoil for the investigators and her family. Then, in 2004, the investigators received the evidence they had been waiting for, this time through the DNA database. They got a match from DNA evidence at the crime scene after 16 years. Michigan was one of the last states to join the database. They had data stored for years, and when it was entered, they found a match with Melinda's killer. Forensic confirmation identified Jason Balcom as the one who committed the two crimes of rape and murder of Melinda in '88. The convicted rapist was also suspected of killing Melinda, but the investigators did not have the physical evidence to charge him. He was serving a 50-year sentence in Michigan since that time, in prison all along. The investigators traveled to Michigan to interrogate Balcom, who was about to be conditionally released for the previous crime. Despite the strength of the DNA evidence, the investigators wanted to extract a confession to avoid putting Melinda's family through a painful trial. Balcom denied knowing about Melinda's murder and even refused to acknowledge knowing her at all. To support their chances of convicting him, the investigators tracked down Balcom's girlfriend from the past, who said she knew nothing about his dark side, but her memories of him at the time of Melinda's murder strengthened the case. She remembered seeing him in a security uniform, which she thought was black with a black hat, and he had tennis shoes. There were things he wanted her to keep at her house. She remembered that he got rid of a pair of shoes, telling us that he stopped by her house the day before he went to Michigan and disposed of the tennis shoes in the trash, which might have matched. Yes, between the DNA and his friend's testimony, Jason Balcom was charged with the murder of Melinda Gans. He was transferred from his prison in Michigan to a California prison awaiting his trial. The night before every hearing was crucial. No matter how strong the case was, there was no guarantee of conviction. As a prosecutor, you enter the courtroom with the family present, feeling confident in the case. Yes, I was very confident because we had the DNA match and excellent officers. The prosecution sought the death penalty for killing Melinda. We seek the death penalty in Orange County in less than 4% of all eligible cases for the worst of the worst, and our most important evidence in this case was Melinda herself because she was a beautiful and kind person. This man described what he went through after discovering his wife. They transferred the terror of this house to the courtroom. I think the jurors were still affected. As a prosecutor, to win, I must convince every member of the jury. Winning or losing depends on the choice of jurors. It depends on who is inside the box. If one of them is not rational or fair, as a prosecutor, you will have a problem. One of the jurors in Balcom's trial will never forget the matter. I was truly shocked because we knew from the beginning how bad the situation was. You mean the brutality of the crime because you have a girl in her second trimester, and there was a baby's crib in the room, and the boxes had not yet been opened. What was the impact when you heard about it? I couldn't imagine what her mother went through. Having her daughter taken from her like that, a monstrous act. Melinda's loved ones felt empowered to start the trial of the killer and see Balcom in front of them. I've been talking about this for years, yes, and I said I forgave him, but now I'll be face to face with this man who took your daughter from you. When Jason Balcom entered the courtroom, I felt pity and sorrow for him and for the life he wasted and the life he took. He showed no emotions throughout the trial. I used to call it, during work, shark eyes, the cold, emotionless look. No one behind the gaze. Jason Balcom was convicted of raping and killing Melinda Gans, and the question remains whether he deserves the death penalty. What do you say to those who say let him live so he can spend the rest of his life in prison? Let him think about what he did. What they don't know about psychopaths is that they don't regret what they did. Do you think he's like Ted Bundy? Of course, he's like Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was a rapist and killer. Jason Balcom was a rapist and killer, but he was arrested. The old ways of detective work succeeded and ended what would have happened. In February 2014, Balcom was sentenced to death, and we await the execution. The lesson in this case is not to lose hope. Now there are hundreds of murder cases in America where someone sits in a room examining old files and works earnestly to achieve justice for the victims' families. Don't lose hope in cases like this because we solve them and want to bring these people to justice. Over the years, Jan found an unexpected way to overcome Melinda's murder by adopting children. We've had 26 children pass through. I can't believe this has become the headquarters for my ministry. Yes, I can reach someone who needs love because I couldn't reach Melinda when she needed someone. I want to talk about Melinda and what you want people to know about her. She wanted people to reach out, wondering what they could do for others. So reach out and do what you can for others. The good of Melinda and her family in the face of such evil is what I take from a case like this. How do you forgive someone who killed your wife's son? How do you accept it and move on? I've never seen an end to a victim's family's grief, but this family is the closest example of it.